The most common thing I heard this entire election cycle was, I don't like his personality, I don't like the way he talks, but my life was better when he was in office. And I'm in this position where I feel a bit unburdened by what has been. I'm gonna wait and see. He's not been sworn in yet. I'm somebody who probably agrees with 75% of his policies. If he focuses on creating jobs, on bringing down the cost of living, securing the border in a responsible way, and being tough on America's adversaries, I'm all for it. Now,
I spent weeks telling people that he was apocalyptic. I'm not going to change now because it's still the same man.
Not treating every single thing like
I think that's when we lose credibility.
What is the best way to move forward if you find yourself either on the broad left or someone who just doesn't agree with the idea of Donald Trump leading this country again? Do you find ways to work with the incoming administration, or do you try to fight the administration every step of the way? Well, the ladies at The View have differing opinions on this. You just heard from Alyssa Farah Griffin, who thinks that, well, there are some areas where I agree with Trump. Maybe we can look to the positives here. Others disagree. Let's take a look.
I'm gonna wait and see. He's not been sworn in yet. I'm somebody who probably agrees with 75% of his policies. If he focuses on creating jobs, on bringing down the cost of living, securing the border in a responsible way, and being tough on America's adversaries, I'm all for it. What doesn't mean we're not gonna call balls and strikes when he does things that are beyond the pale or he uses words that are offensive to people, then be ready to call that out. But I just think I'm kind of shying away from this sort of apocalyptic, it's all, we need to be like losing sleep over it. The American system of government is strong, it's held. There are checks and balances, even if my party's in control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And I think we should I root for America, so I root for a smart, serious Donald Trump presidency, and I root for pushback when he doesn't do things that are smart.
I think all those things are great to dream about.
Well, Whoopi clearly does not think that Donald Trump will do the right thing in his second term, for good reason. I mean, you look at the way he led the country in his first term, and he was divisive. He did create a lot of conflict in this country, but there's a possibility that with the diversity of thought in his upcoming administration, things could be a little different. Ana Navarro, who was, by the way, lifelong Republican, disagrees.
What I'm saying is I have no false expectations that at 78 he's going to all of a sudden turn into a national human being.
And I'm not going to fire makes people tune out.
I spent weeks telling people that he was apocalyptic. I'm not going to change now because it's still the same man.
Not treating every single thing like
I think that's when we lose credibility.
Well, here's the thing. You lose credibility in many different ways. If you don't know what you're talking about and you accuse him of something, then they're going to blow it back. That's why I say we need to wait and see exactly what you're going to do.
So there is one Democratic lawmaker in the House who intends to work alongside Trump officials in order to accomplish some of the goals that progressives have. We're gonna get to that in just a second, but before we do, Cenk, what do you think about this conflict that's playing out? Because I feel like this resonates with a lot, I think it resonates with us, right? Because, I mean, Trump won, Republicans have won both chambers of Congress, and so we have two options. You either fight every step of the way or try to find some silver linings.
Good news, I have the answers.
Okay.
Okay, so first let me say what I agree and disagree with those guys on. Alyssa Farah Griffin says she agrees with 75% of Trump's agenda. I don't. So, but if you're coming at it from her perspective, I understand why she says that. Look, let him cook on that 75% I agree with, right? So now we're in a different camp, and Whoopi and Navarro, et cetera, are in a different camp. But we're also not in their camp. When part of the clip we didn't show you, Whoopi Goldberg was talking about how he's a misogynist and a racist, and she doesn't really want to hear anything else. And that's her perspective, and you can't question her perspective, right? So I think that that's too much, and I'll tell you what I think about that in a second. But at least I agreed with Whoopi for the first time in a long time, where she said, well, let's wait and see what he does so we could respond to reality rather than respond to our worst fears and expectations. And so, all right, good, level-headed there, in my opinion. Ana Navarro, look, I feel mixed about what she's saying too. She said, look, I thought it would be apocalyptic, and I'm not gonna change and say that it's not gonna be apocalyptic. And that's a principled position that I could respect. Do I think it's gonna be, do I agree with her that it's gonna be apocalyptic? No, I'm within that range, at least I'm in the Whoopi camp. But hold on, let's see. Why? okay, so now this is important. You have to separate out the past and the future, okay? In the past, has Donald Trump done and said things that were racist and sexist and misogynistic? Abso-freaking-lutely, okay? So now you want to disagree about that, we can go back and have those old fights if you want, right? But that's not the question at hand. So it's part of the question, does he have those instincts? I think he does have those instincts, right? But the question, real question is he going to act on those instincts? And so, well, what would prevent him from acting on those instincts if he was unpopular? Why? Because he likes being popular. So now, is that going to be enough? I don't know. I don't know how anybody knows. So the people who say no, he's going to destroy everything in his path, and he's purely racist and misogynistic, and that's all he wants, and that's all his followers want. That is definitely not true. Okay, the reason it's not true is because I know that his followers, for a fact, that's not the only thing they want. I'm not naive and don't think, oh my God, there's not a single racist or sexist among his followers. That's absurd. Of course there are, right? But are they the majority? Is that the majority of what they want? No, absolutely not. Why do I say that? Because I've seen every single poll. And so you might say, well, they didn't ask about, hey, are you a racist? And even if they did, they wouldn't answer yes, even if they are. I understand all that. But they're super clear on what they want. They want to stop inflation, stop immigration. Those are number 1 and 2 by a landslide in what they want. And you got to remember, the Trump supporters are not a monolith. So some portion of them are what Whoopi and Ana Navarro described, but a big chunk of them that were going to Kamala just 6 weeks before the election and then went to Trump are generally independents that are just looking for a better life and a better economy, etc. And he'll lose all those guys if he goes extreme.
Right.
And so he'll lose another chunk in the middle if he goes extreme. So there's a reason why he might mitigate for his own advantage, for his own selfish purposes. He might mitigate some of his extreme impulses, but we don't know until he does it. And by the way, there's a second layer to it. Once he does something, how is his base going to react? And are they going to reel him back in or encourage him? I know every leftist and Democrat thinks they're just going to encourage him to get worse and worse. I have a super controversial opinion. I don't think they are. I think some portions of them are, but I think a big portion are going to tap the brakes and say, no, we didn't tell you to go in that direction. We don't want you to go in that direction. We want you to go in this direction.
Yeah, remember, I mean, look, I know that a lot of Democrats want to downplay the extent to which Trump won the popular vote, but let's keep it real. It's very rare for Republicans to win the popular vote, and Trump did this time around. Last time it happened was in 2004. His coalition is much broader today versus what it was in 2016.
Yes.
And so it's important to keep that in mind. It's not the same base that we were dealing with in 2016. There certainly were, the yes men faction within the Republican base back then. They still exist, I'm sure. But the broader base, I think, is really looking for change and looking for some relief, economically speaking, when it comes to public safety and immigration. That's what they're looking to, as well, as Cenk was mentioning earlier. So I think that it's what I was kind of getting at yesterday, Cenk, when I said his base feels like the culture within his base feels different this time around. And I realized, oh yeah, it's because he's broadened his base, and there's a bunch of people in there who actually voted for Biden in 2020. A lot of people who voted against Trump and voted for Hillary in 2016. These are people who kept making a bet on Democrats again and again, and they're not happy, and so they decided to maybe take a bet on Trump this time around.
Yeah, two quick things on that. Look, I know that we oftentimes will say things early, Ana and I will, and it'll take a little while for people to acknowledge it, just to put it mildly. So we're doing it again, and I want to be clear about it. Yes, I think his new base is different than his old base. I think his new base is a lot more diverse. It has a lot more populists. And by the way, those populists will not necessarily rebel in the direction that we want, right? But are they more rebellious, or are we wrong? And they're the same cult they ever were. And when Trump orders something, they'll go against their own interests in a second, right? That, in my opinion, was the old base, and I couldn't stand that, right? My assessment is that this new base is way more rebellious, so they'll rebel in a direction against vaccines and COVID, et cetera, that we don't agree with. But they'll also, I think, will rebel on corruption and war and Israel and many other things that right now no one else expects, They don't believe us. They think we're wrong. They think we're doing a right-wing turn. They think all these conspiracy theories, etc. Right? But the reality is, we are sensing that that base is new and rebellious and feisty, and we think that on some of his worst abuses, they will reel him back in. And some of them, they might go forward, depending on where they stand in the political spectrum, okay?
I think the other half of the equation, though, Cenk, is the fact that, and people are gonna hate that I say this, but it's true, that he is reelable. You get what I'm saying?
I do, that's such a great point.
Yeah.
See, this is another thing that they are underestimating. So it's not that Trump doesn't have bad instincts. It's not that he didn't deserve every insult that I ever gave him, okay? It's that he also, at the same time, two things can be true at the same time. He also wants to be popular. He wants to be loved. That's his number one thing, right?
Yep.
He just, honestly, he doesn't even know how to do it. Like if he knows well enough to be able to beat Democrats, because Democrats are apparently, Democratic leadership, dumbest people on earth. They don't know how to be popular at all. They keep losing to Trump, right? But his first time around, he did some things that were, relatively popular, apparently enough to get reelected. But he did a lot of things that were deeply unpopular, and he left when his polling was in the 30s, and that's why he lost the 2020 election, right? Now, there are things that he could do to go in a populist direction where he would be incredibly popular. Is he gonna actually do that? There's no way of knowing, but he wants to be loved. And that's not such a bad thing for a leader in a democracy. So let's see where we can find the things that we agree on. Let's see where we can push him in the right direction before we give up, right? I feel like a lot of the other parts of the left and the Democrats go, no, let's give up right away, okay? Let's assume that there will be no rays of hope, and let's just go to our trenches and start firing at them before they fire at us. But what that's going to do is have them respond in a maximalist way, have them dig into their trenches. And I don't know if you know this if you're a Democrat. They won, we lost. They have the White House, the House, and the Senate. You really want to push them to their maximum by punching first? Why don't you let him punch first and then we'll react? And the maximalist approach is not always the right approach. I know for the left, that's like mind-blowing. No way. We have to be the most extreme people on earth. Otherwise, we're not pure enough. No, that's a terrible strategy.
Yes, I agree with you on that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a Democrat who is going in a direction that I'm actually happy to see because he's looking for silver linings. He's looking for ways to score some wins for Democrats, even with the situation that we're coming into. So with that in mind, Representative Khanna has suggested during an interview that Democrats could actually work with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in the Department of Government Efficiency to essentially cut spending in areas that the left has been wanting to cut spending on. Let's take a look.
I do want to ask you about, we were just talking about this a few moments ago, DOGE, as it's called, this Department of Government Efficiency, led by Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk.
Well, ultimately, they're going to provide recommendations. It's Congress that appropriates money. Let me provide an area where there could be bipartisan collaboration. I mean, the defense budget, which is nearly $1 trillion, is dominated by 5 primes. There has been tremendous reporting about the waste, fraud, and abuse in that budget. The Pentagon hasn't passed an audit and has failed the last 6 or 7 audits. So if they go to say there needs to be more open competition, not the monopolization in defense contractors, and propose recommendations, that's something that I think could be supported. If they find areas of truly wasteful spending across the government, they would get support.
Now, of course, Elon Musk himself is a recipient of federal money as a result of being a private contractor. The Pentagon does provide some money to him as a result of the companies that he owns and how those companies, like Starlink, for instance, can assist the military for various reasons. Now, with that in mind, though, while Elon Musk is very unlikely to go after his own government grants, doesn't mean it would stop him from going after the government grants of other defense contractors. So we'll see how that plays out. But look, the point of what you're hearing from Representative Khanna is, look, if there are areas where we can work together, we're gonna work together. And I think that's the right approach. It doesn't mean that you're needlessly and gratuitously committing to working on behalf of the Trump administration. But it does mean, hey, you know what? We've got some priorities, and sometimes those priorities or sometimes those interests align with some of the interests of the more populist right. And so if we can find a way to work together on those issues, let's do it. And besides which it's not just about policy wins or cutting spending in areas where we think spending should be cut. It's also about what the American people want here. And in a recent poll by CBS News that asked what should congressional Democrats do now, a whopping 86% say try to find common ground with Trump. Only 14% say oppose Trump on all issues.
Oh, look at that. Both Anna and I said try to find common ground before you go into the fight. And everybody on the left said, oh, you're nuts, you're crazy, the American people don't want that. Oops, again, you were wrong, we were right. 86% of Americans say try to find common ground first. You're welcome. So now in terms of Ro Khanna, exactly right. And guys, they're gonna make cuts. What do you wanna do first? The cuts we hate or the cuts we love? How is this a hard question? We've been wanting to cut defense for as long as I've been a progressive, as long as I've been on the left, as long as I've been on the right. It is back when I was a Republican decades ago, right? And then nobody ever wants to cut the Pentagon because they're all corrupt, right? So now if we're having a conversation about the first cuts should be to the Pentagon, that's a beautiful conversation. Take the win, right? And so I love what Ro Khanna is doing by leading, going out in front and saying, oh, we're doing cuts, great, I got some proposals. It's one thing when I say, it's a whole different thing when a United States congressperson says it.
Right.
And so when I say it, maybe Elon and Donald Trump Jr. and people online, in the online media take it seriously, but mainstream media unfortunately still drives a lot of the narrative, and mainstream media wouldn't quote an online host if their life depended on it, right? But when a US congressman says it, they're like, oh wait, are we doing cuts in the Pentagon? Okay, and now it's become a conversation. Great job, Ro Khanna. Excellent news there, and exactly the right direction.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.